Hey, today I want to have a conversation with you about digging a well. You know, you own your property, got your property. One of the biggest costs that you would go into maintaining and updating your land and just cultivating your land is the water well. You know, we all need water. Everybody know we need water. And a lot of people says, you know, what's the difference? Should I get a shallow well or should I get like a deep well? So we're going to just go into real briefly a high level about shallow well versus a deep well. I'm going to talk about some pros and some cons to a little bit of all of that. So let's talk about a shallow well. A shallow well is typically about 25 to 50 foot deep, and that's tapping into the surface. You know, it's near the surface. Let's talk about the pros. The first pro in digging a shallow well is cheaper. Without a doubt, we already know it's cheaper. It's going to be cheaper. Then it's faster. It's faster installation, less equipment, less time. Then it's less maintenance. It's a whole lot easier to maintain because you got to power your well. How do you power your well? Most people power the well through electricity, but if you want to go kind of solar panel or something, battery pack or what have you, you want to power a shallow well, is a whole lot easier to maintain. Sustainability. If it's in wetlands, a shallow well can be excellent. If you got a lot of wetland area next to you, a shallow well can be great. And it's good if your needs are just small to minimal. So if you're not trying to power a whole agriculture area, but you're just trying to do your little small homestead, something quaint, not a lot, a shallow well may be something good. Now let's talk about some bad things about a shallow well. Vulnerability. You know, you got runoff. And if you're in a rural area, you got farmland, you got all of this fertilizer, you got pesticides, and shallow wells are very susceptible to being compromised by runoff water, fertilizer, chemicals, and a lot of other things. You know, people spray right-of-ways, they do plant vegetation killers, and then that goes through the drainage system. So a shallow well may not be the best because it can risk contamination unless you isolate it nowhere near nothing at all. Seasonable. Vulnerability. So you can get some vulnerability based on the season. If it's dry season, if it's real dry for that season, a shallow well may not be your best solution. Limited water supply. You can be limited because it's a shallow well. You got all these seasonals, sometimes a lot of rain, sometimes a little rain. You know, you're very susceptible to that. Now let's go into deep wells. See, we did a deep well. Now let me tell you, the cost with a deep well, well, I go into that. Let's talk about the good things. So typically a deep well is 150 feet or more as far as in depth. One good thing about the pros about a deep well is more reliable. Your water quality is typically a little bit better, and because it has so many filtrations between the limestone, between the sand, it has its own natural filtration system. So water, not only reliability, the aquifers are typically a little bit larger, and your area, you have more that's pouring into there above the ground, is going into that main aquifer. Better water quality, like I said, the filtration system, you got all of that. You less risk a lot of above ground bacteria, a lot of runoff, and a lot of other things. Consistent water supply. A lot of time deep wells, they're not as susceptible to some of those droughts and some of those dry living conditions. A lot of time deep wells can maintain and sustain the water table during those challenging times. Not always, and remember, all of these things I'm sharing with you are not consistent around the base, but I'm just talking about around my area in the state of Florida, North Florida. These are the things that I found out when I was weighing the cost. Another thing, now let's talk about some cons. I'm gonna go through some cons. One of the cons are, of course, the cost. Our well was around 125 to 130 feet deep, and the cavern was like a 40-foot deep cavern full of water. They put it right about in the center, about 22 feet inside of that 40 feet. One of the things that happened with that's a lot of cost. It's a lot of initial cost. Our well ran about $8,500 about 2 years ago. And like I said, I'm in Northwest Florida, so it may vary. You may go to different areas. The same depth well may be a whole lot less. You got to think about what rock it has to go through. You got to think about how much drilling, how much time, how much labor, the casing costs, all of that kind of stuff to dig your well. So everything is different based on your area. Operating costs, of course, you got to power that pump at the bottom. We got a submersible pump, and we have to power that, and we use electricity. We have used it with generators during the time we was off grid. We utilized generators, and those generators maintained and kept us with a supply of water. So if you run it on a generator, a lot of gas to maintain. We basically took baths at certain times. We utilized water at certain times of the day to keep the cost down. If you're looking at electricity, you're looking at must have like a 225 or higher volt. You're gonna need a lot of energy to pump that well. So you're gonna increase your light bill to keep that well going. The time that it took to install that well, it's gonna be a longer installation time. Typically when you got a deep well, ours took a little bit under, maybe about a week for the beginning to the end. Of course, there was some 3-day, some weekends in that and a little bit of this, but it took about 5 working days to actually dig the well. Complex maintenance is more maintenance involved in that, so you got added maintenance care on top of that. One thing I do want you to keep in mind when you're digging a deep well, try to find a vendor that's familiar with the area that you're trying to dig that well. The reason why it's so important to find a vendor that can truly know that area, because you can risk over drilling. And where over drilling, imagine you got a cavern or a casing of water. Some people that's not familiar with that area, they're not familiar with aquifers in that area, they may go a little bit too deep, and then it'll compromise the integrity of that water, and then they'll risk some leakage or even compromise that whole well itself, and then you might have to dig even deeper. So make sure you get someone who truly knows that local environment. I know you might be able to find someone cheaper that may be out of state or out of area, but remember this, it's worth that investment. Don't cheap it, don't shortcut it. Get someone who knows what they're doing. So whether you're choosing a shallow or a deep well, it's really going to depend on you and what you need. Classic example, we have one deep well where our main homestead, our home, everything that we need, but we have some acreage. So we might dig some additional wells, and they may be shallow wells just to feed animals or just to feed livestock or just to do some gardening, you know, far as agriculture. We might not need a deep well for certain areas. It really depends on where you are and your needs. So just keep in mind, how much water do you need, the usage of your water. Think about how frequent, are you susceptible to droughts, all of those different things to allow you to make the best decision that you want to make when it talks about digging a well. So those are my little tidbits, my thoughts. And remember, I'm not a professional well digger by no means. I'm just telling you some of my experiences and some of the research that I've done far as decide what type of well that I wanted. So we went to deep well, and if you had to look at the math and all of that, $8,500 well, when I lived in the city, my water bill typically was about anywhere from $35 to $40 per month. By me paying that initial cost of $8,500 to dig a well, it'll take me 17 years of $40 monthly payments to pay off that well where the water is now, quote, free, right? But remember, I can use as much water as I want to. I'm not limited. My bill does not fluctuate. It's paid, it's done. So really, that's not really an equal like weighing, but if you want to look at the cost factor, a typical well will last about 35 to 50 years. Now we know there's a lot of wells that last far longer than that. They got wells going back to biblical times where they still are able to utilize the well. So wells can last a long time. You might have to do some maintenance, some repair to it, but without a doubt, you're not locked into a cost, and you're getting good, clean, purified, beautiful, nice well water. So y'all take care, stay blessed, and I hope this has been helpful. If it has, go ahead and hit that like button for me. And if you like this conversation and more of this conversation, go ahead and subscribe. Till the next time, don't forget to keep on growing. Grow.